Welcome to the Manager Tools Members Only podcast for July, late July, 2006. Hello everyone, this is Michael Ozan, your tardy host for our July Members Only podcast. Today, Mark Horstman and I have something special planned for you. Now, we spent a lot of time at the end of last year talking about how to write someone else's review. Now the question is, what should you do to prepare for your own review? Think of it this way. Suppose you had 3 folks working for you, and one of the 3 spent a couple of hours over the previous months preparing for their time with you. They had reviewed the entire year, prepared better information for you for their review, and taken their time writing their self-evaluation, including specific data to support their points. Now, wouldn't that be impressive? If there were a close call to be made, might it go in their direction? Well, in this cast, part 1 of a 2-part series, we walk you through everything you need to prepare for your review with your boss. And if you think it's too early, think again. Our process timeline is 3 months. And by the way, during the show, we promised a couple of things. You'll find all of these in the members section of the Manager Tools website. 1, a complete transcript of the entire show. 2, a PowerPoint presentation in PDF form with a detailed outline of the review preparation process. And 3, a detailed note-taking form to guide you through the entire process. Folks, no note-taking required this time. We've done all the work for you. As we discussed on discussion boards, these are examples of what you'll get with our premium membership program, which will be announced very shortly. So, now that you've downloaded all the materials and have them printed, let's get going. Hey, Mark, we got a lot of traction from our forecast last year on how to prepare for annual reviews. People really dug those. And I think folks really appreciated the detail, the step-by-step that we typically go through. I think that's often what is missing when you look at all the other kind of management advice that's out there. The other interesting thing that it was the first cast we ever did that was timed to a specific time or a specific event, given that companies mistakenly do annual reviews around the calendar year.
Thank you for saying mistakenly. I think we actually have to do a cast about the system of how to do annual reviews in a company. Not really addressing HR people, but we tend to stay away from making your company better through systems and policies. But the annual review one is a great one to teach people how to do it, how to do reviews on a year-round basis.
We talked about preparing for annual reviews that they're given, but what we didn't talk about, which is to some people even more important, which is how do they get ready for their own reviews. And luckily for them, they only need 3 months to get ready. So why are we doing this cast in July?
It's funny when you're talking about how much people enjoyed the detail. It's funny because we did 4 casts last year, and we were worried about that. We were like, gosh, will this really grab people's attention? And of course it did. But I always worry about that because when I laid this out for coaching clients, I remember they would say, gosh, it seems like so much stuff. But there are a bunch of reasons. And when you hear them, I think there are people out there who go, oh my gosh, he's right. I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't thought of that. So let's go through them. I think there's like 6 of them or something. First of all, the reason you start now in July or early August is a reminder. If listeners haven't been doing their team's quarterly reviews, because remember one of the things we talked about in annual reviews is that you would start doing the reviews of your folks each quarter, give them a mini review so you reduce the chances of a surprise at the end of the year. If you haven't been doing that, think about this. If you're not doing that, what are the chances that your boss is doing that? And if your boss is not, ask yourself, how much have you been thinking about writing the reviews of your folks in the middle of the year? And that's probably even less than your boss is thinking about about what he's going to do about writing your review in the middle of the year. And so what that means is you need to be scheduling those the end of third quarter, Q3 mini reviews with your folks now. Get them on the calendar so that at the end of the year, you're going to be, you'll at least have one underneath your belt, and it won't be reinventing the wheel all over again, the way everybody seems to do annual reviews every year. So that's one thing. Second is, look, we know how busy everybody is. They'll hear the cast, they'll think about it a little bit, they say, wow, this is great, hopefully, and they'll put it off. Or maybe they'll schedule something for August. Then things are going to get busy for whatever reason. It'll go on a back burner for a couple of weeks, and suddenly they're starting in September. No offense, but that's probably what you and I would do. It just you look at,
right.
at developing, spending some time on yourself, and you put that on the back burner so often. We're not trying to be rude here and suggest that they're not following the exact manager tools way. The fact is, life is what happens to you while you're busy making plans, right? So if they start in September, 3 months is December. And something else to think about, you'll want to be done preparing for your own review before you have to start working on your team's review. So hopefully you want to be done in early December. Now look, if they get right on it right now, they'll probably finish early. And that's fine. You can just put the file aside that you develop, give it a 1-hour overview and some polishing at the start of December, and then you can go shopping for Christmas and have a little easier conscience, and you'll feel that much more ready, having gone through the preparation on yourself, that much more ready in terms of delivering your own folks their reviews.
Yeah, can you imagine going to Christmas vacation, having done all this and being ready for the end of the year reviews?
Oh, yeah. Imagine it, even slightly better, which probably people think I'm terrible for saying. Imagine going on Christmas vacation, having it done, and telling people, oh, no, I'm already done.
That's a little of the dark mark coming out there.
Just poke them with a stick as you walk out the door with a smile on your face saying, yeah, I'm not worried about that. Okay, another thing. Third, every quarter you're supposed to be spending maybe 30 minutes keeping your resume current, right? That's what we suggest in our resume cast. Only probably a lot of them haven't been doing that either. This gives you some encouragement to schedule that now. And it's not hard to schedule it because it's only time at your desk alone reviewing stuff. It gives you time to schedule that now to catch up on the first half of the year. At this stage, it doesn't have to be exhaustive because the process is going to unearth a great deal, will help you think more clearly about your end of year review. But you ought to start. And we have a little hint. Those of you who stay with us until the very end of this cast will get a little bonus idea about resumes and reviews that's worth staying for. Fourth. There are actually 6 of these. Because as you do this, you may be disappointed in how you're doing this year, and starting in the middle of the year gives you a fighting chance to do something about it. I can't tell you how many people go, when I tell them in November, hey, you really need to, I thought everybody did this, sorry, gosh, you need to get busy on this, and they realize, I know the 2 or 3 top things are going to be a problem for me, and it kind of is disheartening, right? It's almost like a punch in the gut before you start.
All right. Well, you're right. I think it's kind of like a marathon. I think if you're an effective marathon runner, competitive, you don't start thinking about your time, with a half mile left to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and you know what? That if you do spread it out, if you give yourself a half an hour, what we're talking about is half an hour a week here. It becomes painless. It becomes part of the routine, the boring, the unsexy, unpretty part of management. And at the end of the year, when everybody else is pulling out their hair at a time when they're going through Christmas, for so many of us, you don't have to worry about that. In fact, I don't really talk about this as much, but one of the great things about that would be, if everybody else is so busy, you're probably going to have some free time. Ask yourself what you really want to be doing and want to be known for next year. Spend more time in December when you would be writing everybody else's review and worrying about your own. Spend more time thinking about what you're going to do next year in terms of self-development.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
go ahead.
And having done this one year, doing this the subsequent year is a lot easier.
Oh, yeah. I would even argue that if it takes you 3 months to do it this year, it'll take you 6 weeks the next year.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's something else.
So
too,
that's your seventh. That's your 7th reason. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Nice. Fifth, If for some reason the cache on your server won't hold a year's worth of you and your bosses and your team's emails because the IT people want to keep their servers neat and clean and pretty, and they limit you to a gig PST file or whatever, now is the time to beg for more, to burn your PST or all those emails to a disk in some fashion so that you have it to look at some point later. I've been burned by that before. Oh no, we only cached 3 months worth of emails. Okay? And then lastly, because this is our first members cast of year 2 of Manager Tools, and we're actually kicking off a series. So the timing is kind of a little bit in advance, but still valuable, because our monthly members casts this year, in year 2, I guess from June to June or July to July, however you want to look at it, will have a bias towards career and self-management. Topics like preparing yourself for a layoff, how to get ready if your company is being acquired, considering an MBA, how to start a new job, those kinds of things. They're absolutely managerial in nature, but many of them apply to anyone, whether you're a manager or not. So this is just a way for us to start with a really interesting cast that I think a lot of people will like, and it's really more of a self-development, which is an important professional part of being a manager, no question about it. And then I would just say, one more comment about time, Mike, and that's, could you, if you had to, do all this in one day? You almost could. It wouldn't be very good, but you almost could, because we're talking about, if you spread this out a half an hour a week over 3 months, it's just 6 hours. The problem with that thinking is that if you go through this, you discover you need stuff to help you put your review together, whether it's looking at emails or looking at documents or whatever. And it happens every year. If you wait too long and you panic a little, what ends up happening is you rush writing your own review, which just seems to me galactically stupid. I mean,
galactically.
Right.
Is that a word?
I don't know. I think Spellcheck flagged it.
I think it's fairly accurate.
Yeah, it's not quite universally stupid, but it is galactically stupid. So
okay, well, those are great reasons. When I asked the question, I thought maybe I'd get 1 or 2, but now we have
I'm just
7.
I'm just
since
full
I
of
get
it this
that.
month. Yeah.
You're full this morning. That's what you get for staying up till 4:30 in the morning writing show notes. So, and that's true, folks. and I got lucky after we got done our work in the evening. I think I got to go to bed at 3:30. So.
Yes, that's the lovely part about us having our own jobs.
I love podcasting.
Right.
Okay, so those are all great reasons. So let's get with it.
Okay. Let's remember the process takes 3 months. Is that we only have you spending 30 minutes a week on it. If you spread that over 220 work days in the course of a year, that's less than 3% of your year evaluating your performance. And something else too, Mike. We're suggesting that you schedule this time while you're at work. There are 2 reasons for that. I've really come to learn that managers who take homework home always tend to give that part of their homework, whatever goes home in their briefcase or in their satchel or what have you, their backpack, tends to get a very low priority to work on while they're at home. That's one thing if we're talking about external interviews. But career management within your firm you're already at just seems to get pretty low status. There's no deadline driving it. There's no boss yelling for it. And frankly, I'm fine with that because if you're marginally efficient, everybody listening has 30 minutes at their desk every week to give to this project. There's nobody who's listening. I challenge you to tell me. I guarantee I can find a half an hour in your calendar once a week to do this. And really, to be fair, this is the idea of doing this on your own time at home at night is just one more thing to take away time from what's more important than work, and that's your family. So your spouses will thank us if you spend a half an hour with your feet up on your desk at 5:30 or 6 o'clock one evening doing this. It probably will run longer than a half an hour, though, because we all know how terribly inefficient managers are from 5 o'clock on, but that's still okay. Just get home when you need to get home. Okay, so with those comments in mind, we have a week-by-week planning calendar we're going to walk through. We're not saying any of the weekly dates are sacred. You'll find that it generally is best to go in this order, but it's not a really hard and fast rule. It's important probably to get weeks one and two done before you do anything else. But if you finish week 4 early and you want to head right into step 5, go for it. That's no problem. If you get behind and it's been 9 weeks and you're only on week 5, that's okay too. We're just trying to give you a numerical system in terms of a rank ordering of what order to do them in. As long as you figure out how to make up the time when you're 4 weeks behind. I will say that some managers have told me that they started right in on going to email when they learned the way to prepare everybody else's reviews, and that included mine email, which is a really powerful part of our process. They immediately said, "Okay, let me just start going through emails real quick." I think that's step 10 or something like that, and that's not a good plan. Moving that all the way up to week 1 or week 2. If you swap any couple of weeks adjacent tasks, that's fine, but moving a week 10 up to week 1 is not that smart. You're going to be much more efficient and effective in looking at email the way we suggested if you've done the other work beforehand. And then before we go into the week-by-week review, one final kind of thought. Several of the steps that we're talking about here sound alike. They'll be much more effective in a large company. We're not in any way trying to slight the small company members we have out there at all. Okay, maybe in your small company you don't have job descriptions yet. Okay,
many of them don't even have reviews.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. But surely you won't argue. They won't argue with us. This is a good cast topic. And even if you think about it, it wouldn't hurt for you to prepare an end-of-year overview for your boss, even if you don't get a review. It may affect salary administration, even if there's no formal review process. And
absolutely. There's a review. It just may not be written.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, we ought to use that as one of the distinctions between big and small company. If somebody says they're in a small company, we ask them, okay, is your review written or unwritten? If they say it's written, I say, well, maybe you're a medium-sized company. You're not a small company anymore. But look, even if you don't have a job description, which is pretty standard in smaller companies, Manager Tools doesn't have any job descriptions. You do all that magic technical wizardry, and I talk about stuff.
And you just talk.
Yeah, just blah, blah, blah. But look, week 2, we have a workaround for job descriptions, right? I mean, here are the questions to ask yourself to create your own job description to make sure you're on the right track. And virtually every other week we have in here has validity for a small company or even a startup. So I wanted to say that because as I was reading my own notes, my handwritten notes from years ago, I thought, there's a big company feel to this. And yet I think if small company people approach this I think this is a great self-management tool, even if we don't have reviews. I encourage them to stick with this because this is, if you get this done now, if you get it down now at a small company, when you are a bigger company or when you join a bigger company, when you become executive vice president for marketing or something like that, or for technical services or customer services, you're going to have it down, and you won't need to be worried about making the transition to a big company. You'll know how professionals go about preparing for their annual review, period.
Yeah. Hey, one side comment. It's completely a little bit off topic here, but people in small companies shouldn't shortchange the value of a job description. Matter of fact, I spent, part of why we were up till 3 o'clock in the morning last night is we were talking about we don't have job descriptions, and we discovered that there was a particular task or responsibility that we both thought the other person was really responsible for.
Yep.
And it turns out that it was smack dab in the middle between your skill set and my skill set, and we both have responsibilities around that, but we had both pretty much deferred that particular task to the other.
In fact, I would argue, Mark, that one of the things that makes small companies great, and certainly in our case, the whole trust thing, I trust you to do that, you trust me to do that, in fact, becomes a potential weakness in that trust makes me feel comfortable not even thinking about this thing. And at the same time, you're thinking, I don't even need to think about that, he's got it. And that ball is absolutely on the floor.
Right.
Yeah, because of what we consider to be a strength about our organization, which is trust.
Right. Well, there you go. So even we could use some better job descriptions. Maybe we'll put that on our list of things to do here.
Yes.
All right. So let's get on. step by step, what are the tasks involved here over this 3 month period?
Let me just do the real quick high level overview that everybody seems to love, and I quite frankly it helps me as well. Week 1, you're going to review last year's review. Week 2, you're going to look at your job description. Week 3, you're going to look at your resume. Week 4, you're going to look at your notes from your boss's one-on-ones with you. Week 5, you're going to look at all your one-on-ones for your team. Hopefully this is not a reminder you should be doing one-on-ones. Those should already be happening. Those are the core bedrock principle of manager tools managers. Week 6, you're going to look at all the reports that you and your team prepare and send forth about your organization. Week 7, you're going to do something really creative that was suggested to me a couple of years ago. You're going to look at documents that you've created in the past year. In weeks 8, 9, and 10, the lovely weeks where you get to look at emails, which takes a little while. And then weeks 11 and 12, you're going to write and prepare the review. And actually, it's going to be a review packet. Okay? So that's it, high level. Okay. Let's talk about each one in detail.
Cool.
Last year's review. Now, look, this is, probably the silliest thing in the world, but far too many managers I know that I've coached go into their annual review without even looking at last year's review. Okay? Yeah. This is bad. Look, this is bad if you have the same manager. God, why wouldn't you want to refresh your memory of what she said and the tone she took and what themes there were that you didn't expect? Or if you have a different manager, what do you want them to know that maybe you need to review from the previous year to carry forward? What that might they be thinking about because they've looked at it that you've completely forgotten and they feel like they need to provide continuity between last year and this year. And that's what I would do if I was your new boss. I look at last year's review. You don't want to be blindsided because you didn't spend a little bit of time. Shoot, a half an hour looking at your review. Okay, so look, in week 1, you're going to go over your last year's review. And the purpose of this half hour is to take notes for the rest of the process. In fact, Mike, I would argue that really what we're doing in the first 10 weeks of this is preparing the raw material so that you'll be totally comfortable writing your review.
There you go again with creating those piles of stuff again.
Yeah. It's a valuable pile, but honest, it's a valuable pile.
Horseman's law number 9: create big piles.
Big piles, yeah. It's here in this pile on my desk somewhere. God, if you're saying that, we I guess sometime we have to do a podcast on desk management. Okay, so look, you're going to want to create a folder for this. Those of you who are getting things done, disciples, lucky you, you've got a label maker and it'll be nice and pretty. And we're going to make it even easier for you. On the website, we have a simple form for capturing your thoughts on each of the major tasks and forms of data you'll be looking at. When you combine that, Mike, with the slides that are going to be on the website in PDF form for this cast in terms of describing in detail what we're talking about here, and the transcripts, you put those together in that packet, and you put the note-taking form in there. I have to tell you, it's a pretty awesome package. It will make this as painless as we can possibly make it. We are not available to prepare your review for you. But to me, this is a reminder of the value of what a premium subscription will be, because that's the kind of stuff that will be out there for premium subscribers for both monthly casts and for obviously for weekly casts as well.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's going to make it a lot easier, I think.
It won't be turnkey, but boy, it sure make it simple. As simple as we possibly can. Okay, so in week 1, when we're looking at last year's review, there are like 4 things we want to be looking for as we go through the review. The first one is obviously accomplishments. What did you do well last year? Some of these projects that you were working on from last year, or some of the numbers may have carried over to this year. What we found is that last year, if you did really well on something and it made your review, it was interesting last year. This year, it's assumed you can keep up that low level of cost or that high level of sales or whatever. And so it becomes routine and you don't get credit for it twice. And so we kind of forget about it. It just becomes, well, that's just the way we do things here. But look, if you drove down costs last year and this year you kept them low, even if you didn't have a goal in that area this year, you've probably forgotten about it and you need to remind yourself and put that down as potential fodder for how you write your review. Okay? The review helps you think about themes that may be secondary this year, but still have traction, and they were important somehow last year. Again, what did you do last year that carried over? Maybe a project was split between the 2 years. This review around your accomplishments will refresh your memory. And again, you're just taking notes. It's gonna inform everything you do for the rest of this 12-week process. Second thing you're going to look for is feedback. Look, if you have the same boss, you better refresh your memory on what she talked about last year.
That'd be smart.
Yeah. But I'm telling you, people are. I think I talked about this, Mike. I call it the Christmas rule, Horstman's Christmas rule, right? Which is, you ask people, boy, is Christmas important to you? Oh gosh, I love Christmas. I love seeing my kids open presents. For the many people in the world who celebrate Christmas, many managers who listen to us who celebrate Christmas, and I love it and it's great. And I ask them, well, okay, it's great. And is it stressful? Oh gosh, yeah. It's just I'm wiped out afterwards. And every year I want to cut back and make it simpler, but I never do. And we always end up doing too much. And I'm always tired of work. And then I've got reviews to do. I said, well, look, it's just the Christmas rule. Anything you do once a year that's really important to you is going to be terribly stressful because you don't get to practice it. Well, that's exactly what people do with reviews. They do it once a year. They don't practice. They don't think about it systemically. They don't make it routine and boring and predictable and unsexy and unpretty by doing this kind of stuff. And then you get stressed out about it. So you need to go back and review your review from last year and look for negative feedback, even on some of your accomplishments. So that if there's a potential for that to come back up this year, if you didn't address it specifically this year, you know how to combat it if, in fact, he or she writes about it. Look, you're
right, and you're doing this fairly early in the process. So, like we talked about earlier, if you found there's feedback that you haven't addressed and haven't done anything about, you have an opportunity to do something about it now versus, in early January, late January, when you usually start thinking about this stuff.
In fact, if you do this now, I guarantee you, within 2 or 3 weeks, your boss may come to you and say, "Man, you seem to be kind of re-energized." And privately, you're thinking, "Yeah, I don't want to read about this thing that I was really important in my development plan for next year that I haven't done anything on yet. I got to get to 2 conferences. I got to do this. I got to do this." Yeah, exactly. Of course, if you've worked with your admin real well, your admin right after your review, we didn't talk about this in the review process, but when you come out of your review, you should be scheduling an hour with your admin and say, look, each quarter or each month, you should be asking me where I've gotten on these 7, 8, 9, 10 things that came out of my review, so that I don't wait until September to try to cram everything in.
Good point.
Yeah. You'll also want to look for comments in any of the numerical rankings on your review. People miss this. People they tend to focus on salary and 1 or 2 key areas, the major write-up, looking for the key buzzwords that a company considers important. When you or I in the Army, the big thing was the senior raters review, and what you were looking for is truly outstanding as opposed to just outstanding. That actual phrasing made you a top performer. It was that micromanaged, if you will, in the Army, which has, believe it or not, the military has the best way of handling reviews I've ever seen. So our focus is so much on 1 or 2 key areas. We forget to look for comments in numerical areas, additional comments below, supplementing the ranking of 1 through 5 or whatever scale is used. And you want to look at those and you want to think about those versus this year, because you can bet your boss, if he or she's reasonably professional, is going to look at this and they're going to think, okay, how did Mark do on these things that I mentioned to him last year, or that a previous boss mentioned to him last year. Look for any suggestions in improvements in the characteristics, not just a ding maybe, but hey, I'd like you to do more of this next year. And then you subtly start introducing those evidence of that change in August, September, October. You're going to look good at the end of the year. And again, make it easy. Give yourself a weekly reminder. Hey, you need to be working on presentation skills. You need to get your agendas out earlier. If you do a Control-Shift-K weekly agenda reminder, it's much more likely that it's going to be a relatively painless improvement process for you over the remainder of the year, and it'll be easier for your boss to say, "Wow, I've really noticed a difference in terms of you getting on that. Thank you for doing that." And a lot of times, the question about whether or not you get a top ranking or a good ranking is, hey, he could be in the top, but maybe not. I don't know exactly where he should be. I want to look at everybody else on my team. But then they start looking down at the details, and in every one of the detail areas, you're hitting home runs, or they're noticing a significant change. That can be the thing that makes a difference. Maybe not hitting a home run in the top area. You can still end up getting a top review.
Yeah. What about objectives?
Okay, good. Look, it may be that your company separates this process of creating performance objectives, goals, and so on, or development objectives from last year's review, but many don't. And our point is we don't think of it that way. If you do separate them, consider the two documents as one for the purpose of this process we're talking about. You need to write down in the note-taking form everything you committed to doing in December or January of last year, January of this year.
Good to know.
Yeah, if you're worried about where you are, it's better to know it now than to remind yourself, oops, the Thanksgiving oops, right? Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I better pretend like I've done something in that area. So you want to be able to do that and then check them off, obviously, if you can, or make notes of the ones you've already got done. That's good. And lastly, number 4, boss's issues. Now, as you have some distance to the review, which you didn't at the time you were getting it, you're probably just nervously looking for the percentage salary improvement you were going to get in many cases. Now, after knowing your boss a little bit better, you may see a pattern or a theme or a tone in your boss's review from last year. Make a note of it. Think about how it will affect the objectives he or she gave you for this year, whether you're going to achieve them or not. If you're going to not achieve an objective in an area that seemed to be thematically important for him last year, ask yourself what you can do to get ahead or at least get close to achieving it in the last 6 months of the year. There's no need to solve the problem, if it is a problem, and I'm not saying it is, now, but it'll be easier to think about doing so in 10 weeks if you start thinking about them right away.
Yeah. Now, well, I think the key here is to put yourself in your boss's head for a little bit, because you know your view of what's important and his or her view as to what's important may be different. And last year's review is going to give you good hints as to where he or she places their priorities when it comes down to doing the review. And in my experience, sometimes the review is not reflective of what they're telling you during the course of the year. So,
yep, perfect. Now, look, what we've just talked about, it sort of implies that there's a benefit to thinking about what your boss did last year. But even if your boss is different, Mike, it's still worthwhile to go through these steps. And if you have a different boss and you don't have their comments on your review, that's fine. Go talk to former directs of your boss. If he or she was in your company at the time, see what they say about their reviews. Look for any themes that were there. If you were asking me, if Mike, if I worked for you and then you left and went somewhere else, and somebody said, "Hey, what's Ozan like when he does reviews?" I'd be happy to give you my review. I'd probably tear off the page about salary increase, but I'd give it to you. A lot of people wouldn't do that, but I don't care. It's just a way to make things easier. One more thing, Mike. It probably seems silly to say this out loud, and I probably said this several times during the cast, but just because your firm or your organization, your company, changed the process or the forms they use to do the reviews, this accomplishment, feedback, objective, and boss's issues are still damn important. Okay? Just because the review process changed or the form changed doesn't change this process you're going through. In fact, it'll make you much more likely. Hopefully they've already released him, but even if they haven't, probably they're delaying until the last minute because that's the way things are sometimes. That's okay. Preparing as if you're going to have the old form is fine. You'll be the most ready person to take the new form and write your review on it really, really quickly. In fact, I would argue that if you do it well, your boss is going to say, "Oh, this will give me some sense of what I'm going to be thinking about when I write everybody else's reviews." So that'll stand you in good stead.
Yeah, the forms have nothing to do with this process whatsoever.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for part 1. Now the question is, given that our July cast didn't come out until the end of July, will you have to wait until the end of August for the next one? Nope. Part 2 of this series will be published within a week, maybe even sooner. So, stay tuned. Until next time, so long, folks.